All right, let's take a look at this next lecture in terms of American government. This one's going to be quick, sweet, and short. This comes from the last section of Chapter 3 on the Constitution. These are the 6 basic principles that are contained in the Constitution. You get to see me and these wonderful pieces of paper here. The first one, in terms of functions and pieces that are in the Constitution, is this idea of popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty is, as we've talked about, giving the people the power. What it is not is the government having power over the people. It's not the government telling the people what to do and the government is pushing down on the backs of the people. Instead, it is the people having power over the government. So it's not a question of the government, again, saying you have to do this, because again, the people are the ones that are giving the government power. The second idea that's a key part of the Constitution is what we call limited government. Limited government basically says the government only has a certain set of functions and that the Constitution outlines those functions. To give you an example, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. There is a limit in terms of what Congress can actually do. So Congress can't do a number of things as protected in the Bill of Rights. We also have this idea that government is not above the law. This is a wanted poster, an advertisement after the Watergate affair, and you can see that guy right there. All the other people have been apprehended except for that guy right there. That's Richard Nixon. And so people are saying, this is an advertisement saying, we got to make sure our government is not stepping over its bounds and the government is not above the law. They were claiming that this guy, Richard Nixon, was above the law. The third piece is this idea of the separation of powers. Separation of powers basically says each branch is going to have a particular function. We have 3 branches of government. They have 3 distinct jobs. And they outline it very well. In Article 1, they say, all legislative powers herein shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, meaning simply Congress, in Article 1, they put it in Article 1 for a reason, it was the most important. It's also the longest article of the Constitution. But it basically says that the people that make the laws are going to be Congress. And so by saying we have a Congress that makes the laws, then we have to have Article 2, which says we need an executive branch to enforce the laws. And they say the executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. A President, remember they decided not to do the committee, but a President of the United States of America. They have the enforcement powers to execute in this case. Article 3 says the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The whole idea here is there's one Supreme Court. That's the only court that is outlined in the Constitution, right there, the Supreme Court. But then Congress can legislate and set up whatever courts they deem necessary. So Article 3 outlines exactly what Congress does, exactly what the President does, and exactly in Article 3, the articles outline what Congress does, what the President does, and what the courts do. The fourth idea is something that I'm sure you've talked about before, the idea of checks and balances. Checks and balances mean if Congress passes a law, the President has the right to veto it or sign it into law. If that law that gets passed is challenged in court, then the Supreme Court or the federal courts have to decide it. I'm going to give you this handout later, but the whole idea of checks and balances is the judicial branch has the ability to override both the executive and legislative branch, and each branch has the ability to check the other's power. We got to make sure that the legislative branch is doing its job, the executive branch is carrying out the laws, and the judicial branch is making sure the Constitution is being followed. That's the checks and balances system. Rather than having one legislature and nobody else, everybody has to work together in this cycle to make it work. The fifth concept is judicial review. And judicial review is put in place so that checks and balances can work. Judicial review is very simply, if something is passed, if a law is out there, and somebody challenges it, the court has the right to look at it and determine whether or not it's constitutional. The very first and primary case we look at with that is Marbury versus Madison. And in 1803, the Supreme Court, for the very first time, struck down an act of Congress as unconstitutional. It had to do with judicial appointments, and it had to do with the power of the judicial branch, but it was the very first time in American history that the court said something another branch did was unconstitutional. And that leads us to our final one, and that is the idea of federalism. And again, federalism is the sharing of power between state and national government. The idea is we want states to have some power. We also need the national government to have other powers. This is a very debated topic today. This is something that they deal with when they look at the Little Rock Nine. This is also something that we're dealing with today in a state like Arizona. If you can think about it, the border of Arizona here, just to the south, is Mexico. And Arizona put together a law that was trying to make some enforcement powers on immigration issues. They've got people that are coming across the border into Mexico, or from Mexico into Arizona, and they wanted to be able to try and enforce those laws. Problem is, those are federal responsibilities and federal laws. And so it's a challenge in the court right now. Who has the most authority? Does Arizona have the most authority in terms of immigration because it affects their people? Or does the federal government have the authority when it comes to immigration policy? Again, that is from the last section of Chapter 3 in our main textbook. Those 6 key points are things we're going to see over and over and over again in this course. If you've got questions, go to the book. After that, let's bring them up in class, and we'll see you next time.